Okay, in this video what I wanted to do was go ahead and install Gentoo over SSH. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my desktop here. This is my main desktop system. It already has Gentoo installed. And I'm going to SSH into my laptop and install Gentoo. So we're actually going to be installing Gentoo on hardware and not in a virtual machine. And I'm going to kind of go through the steps on how to do that somewhat briefly. So I mean, it's probably best if you know a little bit about Gentoo. But I'm going to try to make this as concise as possible. But basically what we're going to do is download the ISO for the minimal install, which would be right here on Gentoo. I don't need the graphical environment, so we're just going to save this file, and this is the file that I will boot up on my laptop. Now the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to boot this ISO up on the virtual machine to show you how to set up SSH, and then I'm going to switch it over to my laptop and we'll SSH into my laptop and install Gentoo on the main system there. That way you can see how it's installed on hardware. Okay, so after you boot up the Gentoo CD, this is the live CD, and this will be what you'll have when you boot up into the live CD. To enable SSH on the live CD so that you can SSH into a machine using the live CD, so you don't have to be at that physical machine, you need to set a password for the root account, and you can make that anything you want. This will be basically temporary, and that way you'll have a password to SSH into. Then you'll need to enable SSH. So you'll do /etc/initd sshd space and then do start, or that will get the SSH service started. So now you should be able to SSH into that machine from another machine, and that's what I'm going to do. So now I'm going to turn the video off and I'm going to boot this disk on my laptop, which is in another room, and I'm going to set it up just like I did here so that I can SSH into that machine and we can start the install from SSH, and I'll be right back. Alright, so that I have the system on my laptop, the ISO file booted, and I have it SSH'd into, which I guess I could have showed that. So let's go ahead and do SSH root at live CD, and this is actually SSH'd into my laptop, which is in my upstairs room. So I am on the actual physical machine in the window right here. I'm still on my main desktop right here, but I am SSH'd into the system. So we're going to do a quick install of Gentoo on this system. I'll probably use the binary packages to make it a little bit faster. Just as a notice that I'm not using the official website's handbook. That will be something you'll want to do if you're doing this on your own for the first time, or if you're a little bit unfamiliar with Gentoo. I'm kind of using a cheat sheet. You could try this and see if it'll work on your system, but this will kind of give you an idea of the install process if you are curious about Gentoo. But definitely if you do Gentoo for your first time, I would at least recommend reading through the official handbook of Gentoo. That's just on gentoo.org, because a lot of the things on here, especially like my make.conf file, is specified just for my laptop. It's very specific to that, and it'll be set up for things that will make my laptop work, which may not work on your system. So that's something you'll want to keep in mind, is that this is not a comprehensive install for somebody who's brand new to Gentoo, but obviously you're more than welcome. This might at least introduce you to how it's done. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to look and see what I have on here. The Ventoy here is where I have Gentoo booted from the thumb drive. This is a backup drive here where I have some games and things like that on, and then this is the main boot drive that I'm going to want to actually install Gentoo on. So the first thing I'm going to do is run cfdisk on dev sda, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of these partitions and create new ones. I'm going to do like a 12 megabyte for EFI, 12 megabyte, 512 megabyte for via EFI. I'm going to do a 2 gigabyte swap file, and the rest of it's going to be the root. Quit that. Now I have the partitions created. Now what I want to do is make the file systems. So I'm going to do vfat on the dev SDA1. This is going to be my EFI partition. And then I'm going to do a make swap on the dev SDA2 for my swap partition. I'm going to go ahead and turn that swap on so that I can enable it in the FS tab easier later. Now we're going to make FS. I'm going to do ext4 for the SDA3, and this will be my main root partition. And then now I'm going to go ahead and mount those partitions. I'm going to mount the root partition into mount Gentoo, and then I'm going to make the directory boot EFI on that partition so that I can mount my EFI partition into that directory, and that will give me my mounts for my root and my EFI. We will do the swap file later. So now what I need to do is get the stage file installed. Okay, now I need to install the the stage file, which will be the base system. So I've got Gentoo website loaded up here. I'm going to do this kind of an easy way here. So I'm going to go to the downloads. I'm going to get the stage 3 desktop profile, so it'll have use flags that I'll need to install any sort of desktop system I need. You can set your profile to like KDE, GNOME, stuff like that later on. I'm just going to have the standard desktop profile because I'm going to use window manager. I'll probably use like Sway or something like that. So I'm just going to copy the link, and I'm just going to wget, and I'm going to download that stage file, and this will download the current stage file, stage 3 file, which will basically be the base system that you'll be working from. Alright, now we have that downloaded. The make.conf right here you won't have. This is my make.conf for my laptop. I had it backed up from when I had this installed before. So I'm actually just going to copy this over here. And what this will do will extract the tar file into my partition, which will be the actual system. Again, if you don't understand what any of this stuff means, look through the Gentoo handbook. It'll explain what it's doing. And now this is where you're going to want to configure your make.conf. Now the one that is just by default is right here. It's very plain, very simple. I know you can't see all of it because I have the fonts pretty big. But again, with your make.conf, you're going to want to go through the Gentoo handbook and set it up, set your use flags, things like that, set for your particular system. Because the thing about Gentoo is you set it up how you want your system to run. With the most powerful thing about Gentoo is the use flags and things like that to set your system up exactly how you want it. I'm not going to be using this file because what I have is my own make. I usually back those up, and I recommend that if you install Gentoo and you have your make file set up the way you want, back it up in case you need to reinstall. You won't have to go through and try to remember what use flags you had and things like that, and how you had it set up. Because I have two different machines that have Gentoo on, my desktop and my laptop. My desktop's going to be using completely different system than my laptop. My desktop is AMD with Radeon graphics. My laptop is Intel with NVIDIA graphics. So they're two completely different systems, and I have their make.conf set up quite a bit different. So I'm actually going to copy, and again, you won't have this, but I'm going to copy my make.conf into my portage folder. Again, you want to configure yours how you want. I'm going to go ahead and copy the DNS info just so we can have internet correctly when we reboot or when we Chroot into it. I'm going to set up my FS tab. Now, one of the cool things about the live CDs, they do have the Arch install scripts on the live CD, so you can install similar like you would with Gentoo. So I can do genfs tab, my mount Gentoo, and then put that into mount Gentoo, etc, and fs tab. And then I'm going to just take a look at it, make sure it's good. And it has my, it has my root, it has my EFI, and it has my swap. So everything is set up in my FS tab correctly. So now we're going to Chroot into the system, and we're going to use Arch Chroot, similar to what you would with Arch. And now we're actually Chrooted into my laptop in the actual install. I'm going to go ahead and sync the repositories, and this will give me the updated portage and all that kind of stuff. This can take a bit of time, especially if on a slower connection or something like that. My laptop, I have it wired in on Ethernet. I've done this before over Wi-Fi, and it can take quite some time. So that's why I made sure my laptop was put in on Ethernet, so it will install that. Okay, at this point it's going to complain about you need to have the news files read. This is similar to like with Arch Linux, where you have the Arch news. It's going to have information there you may want to know. So when this pops up, that you have news items to read, you're going to want to read them. You can do eSelect news list, and it'll list all the ones you haven't read yet. And then you can do eSelect news read, and it'll go through all that. Or you could select which one you wanted to read manually, but it'll go through and show you. You're going to want to browse through this and make sure there's nothing in here that you need to be aware of as you install. But there's nothing I'm worried about. This is a brand new install. In my make.conf, I want to take a look at it real quick. You'll notice that I have it filled out quite a bit here. But you'll notice in my features here, I have get bin package request signature. Candy is just some extra flair when it's installing, and then parallel fetch for parallel downloads, and parallel install, I actually don't remember what that is. I'll have to read and remember that. But this is what's going to enable you to be able to get binary packages. This is good, especially on my laptop, since it's a much slower system than my desktop. I don't do binary packages on my desktop because it can compile pretty fast. My laptop, on the other hand, is pretty slow on compiling. It's a fairly old laptop. So I use the binary packages when possible. It was like last year or something like that, where Gentoo released a lot of their packages as binaries, so that you can install the system much quicker, upgrade systems much quicker. You're still going to have to compile quite a few things just because of the use flags that you use, but it will save quite a bit of time on installing, especially on the initial install and getting a system up and running and booted. That is my binary packages. I have those. If you want to install those yourselves, again, this is what you're going to want in your features column. I can go through a couple of things here, but you'll notice here the video cards. I'm using Intel NVIDIA because it has Intel as one, and then the discrete is NVIDIA. It's got the 2 GPU thing on the laptop, so I need to have both of those. The accept license, this is just to make sure that it's not going to complain about you not accepting different proprietary licenses and things like that. If you just do accept license asterisk, it ain't going to bug you. It'll install your packages. Your mark here, March, this is just the architecture you're wanting to use. You can set this to specifically what you're wanting to compile for, but if you're compiling for the system that you're using, just use native. The Rust flags, this is something that won't be in there automatically. It's again, just make sure if it's compiling unrust, it's going to use that native flag and everything else. These are my use flags, which again, your default one won't have all these, and I have these use flags set up specifically for what I need on my laptop. So these may not have anything to do with what you need. If you hear that noise in my background, that's my son. He's running around flapping. They call that stemming. He's nonverbal autistic, so the noises he makes is called stemming, and he will go around the house and make those noises. That's just the noise of our house, so just consider it background noise. So there we go. We got that part set up. Most all this other stuff, again, you'll want to go through the Gentoo handbook to see what you need. So I have my make.conf set up. The CPU flags, this will make sure you're going to want to install this package as well. What this will do, it will make sure that all the processor features are set as flags on your system, so when it compiles, it will use those hardware features that are compatible with your processor. So that is some. Oh, I forgot. One thing I forgot to do. When you set up the bin packages, you got to run Gentoo or whatever that's called, key rings and everything for the binary packages. There we go. Yeah, you want to run Gentoo. That'll make sure that all your key rings are set up correctly so that it will install. If you don't do that after you enable the bin packages, it will complain like crazy. Alright, we got our CPU flags program installing. Now what this is, this will put those use flags into your package.use, and what this does is make sure those are enabled so that you will have those use flags that are for your processor. I already talked about the video cards. Again, if you're using AMD, you're going to want these for your video card in your makefile, Intel. Again, read through the Gentoo handbook, it'll explain all that. I'm going to set up my time zone. This again is going to be dependent on where you're from, but that'll be, you'll make a symlink from user share zone info America. I'm in the Chicago time zone. I'm nowhere near Chicago, but that is my time zone, Central Time, and we will copy that to local time. Let me clear that so you can see better. And then we want to nano into our etc locale.gen, and you want to make sure you have your locale set up correctly for whatever language you're using. So I'm going to use English US with UTF. And then you just run locale gen. Then you want to do your locale selection, so you do eSelect locale list. This will show you what's going on here. I'm going to go ahead and set it, or what you have available for your locales. So I'm going to eSelect locale set for, because I want to set it to that English US UTF-8. Okay, and then you'll need to, once you do that, you're going to want to reload your profile just to make sure those variables are enabled. So you'll want to run that command, this command right here. Now I am wanting to, okay, what did he just do? Okay, I'll be right back. And my son decided to grab the Cheez-Its and dump them all over the place, so that's what that was. Anyway, I'm back. Alright, so where was I? We just set up our profile after doing our locales. What I like to do is, to help with init ramfs and all those kind of things for when it boots, is make sure that I have install kernel enabled for grub and dracket, and that will make sure that when I install grub or I get a new kernel or firmware or NVIDIA driver or anything like that, it will automatically run dracket, which will get my init ramfs and all that stuff running, so I don't have to do that manually. I used to have to do all that stuff manually whenever there was an upgrade or an update, and you'd have to make sure you make your initfs and make your grub and all that kind of stuff. This will kind of help you do that automatically. So in my package.use, I made a file called install kernel. You can name it whatever, and I just wanted to make sure I spelled everything correctly at this point. We'll know if when I reboot or compile things complain. Just double check your spelling. And what this is the package.use is enabling specific use flags for specific files that you don't have global. So I want it grub and bracket for my install kernel. And we have that. Now I want to install my kernel and my firmwares. This will be the Linux firmware for your devices that need some proprietary firmwares and things like that, Wi-Fi cards, things like that. I'm going to be using the binary kernel, the Gentoo binary kernel, which is what the Gentoo bin kernel is. And since I am on Intel, I'm going to have to do Intel microcode. So I'm just going to copy that. And this will emerge and install the firmware, the kernel, and the Intel microcode. And since I have install kernel as a use flag, it should automatically make everything I need. If not, it'll do it whenever we do grub and all that kind of stuff. But it'll probably run Dracket to enable the initramfs and all that kind of stuff, so it'll boot correctly. I think I made a bit of a mistake. I needed to install well, I don't have to do sudo, but emerge udn at world. I forgot to update the use flags for the system, so it's gonna. That's why I got that error and it complained at me because I forgot to. I didn't have that in my notes, so when I did the sync, I should have done the emerge, especially after I did the use flags. I should have updated the world there. This might take some time, so I'm going to install this. Sorry about that, I completely messed that. So again, that's what I mean, don't follow me 100% sometimes. But you'll want to go back after you do the emerge sync, or at least after you do the CPU flags. You'll want to run this command here, which will update your use flags for your files and everything else. And that should fix the error I had a second ago. And it will probably be quite a bit of files. So this here is just talking about using bin packages. If you want to disable these, whatever it's called, if you want to silence the warnings, you can use this flag here, but I'm not too worried about it. Let's see if this will actually do it. I think it will. Alright. Yeah, up here I have it. It's 1 of 78, so we do have quite a bit to compile. It's going to use some binary packages, so it won't take super long, but this will take some time. Obviously, you're not going to want to sit here and watch this whole thing with me, so I'm going to stop the video and let this compile these updates. Again, I'm sorry about missing the... That was very important. I'll need to add that to my notes. Actually, you know what? I would probably prefer to do it after... Yeah, after you do your make and all that stuff. I want to go ahead and put it after here. And yeah, it's still a bad place to put it because again, this is just talking about the... I'll get everything right in a minute. There we go. Let's just do it that way. So that way my notes are a little bit better. Again, sorry about that. So I'm going to pause the video while this is doing its thing, and then we'll get back at it after this, and I'll see if that fixed my problem of installing my kernel and everything. I think that was the error that popped up and wouldn't let me install it. So we'll see if that fixes it. I'll be back. Okay, I think it is finishing up the updates. That took quite some time. So again, it was a lot of updates, and my laptop compiles pretty slow. So after this finishes up, this update, this one shouldn't take too long. We'll go ahead and get the kernels installed correctly and the firmwares installed correctly, and we'll finish up this install. Okay, now that that is installed, all the updates are installed, let's see if it will let me do the kernel and the firmware. So we're going to run this command and then see if it will work this time. Again, it's just telling me that it is going to Use the bin packages for some things. Oh my lord, he's loud. Okay. It was just telling me it was going to use some bin packages. I'm sorry about the noise in the background. He's watching his cartoons and he's kind of going nuts with his stemming at the moment. As you can see, it's running Chroot. That's why I did the install kernel. That way it'll automatically do Chroot to install the initram fs for booting, to make sure all your modules will boot correctly. It automatically is pulling in grub, so I won't have to install that manually later. Sometimes you have to, but since I have my use files set up, I don't have to install grub manually. I'll just I'll have to install it on the EFI partition, but as far as like the actual package, I won't have to manually install it. It's pulling in the firmware at the moment. This will take a little bit of time as well. I might have to cut some of the video down. Gentoo is a long process, or it can be a very long process, especially on the system like my laptop, which is much slower. Now just pull it in the Intel microcode, and it'll install Chroot again. It'll keep doing that when it pulls in these files that need to rebuild the initram fs. So it'll do this actually a couple of times because of the Intel firmware, the microcode, the Intel microcode firmware, the Linux firmware, and then like the kernel and things like that. We'll also notice here that we're going to have news items again that we'll need to read. And that'll show you what it's talking about. And this is just some new things that have come through with Chroot and all that, kind of like the way I have my system set up. So again, you may want to read through that if you want to understand that a little bit better. The next thing I want to do is enable my host name, or set the host name, which will just be the name of the machine once we reboot. I also want to... I'm going to actually install Network Manager instead of the DHCP CD. For my laptop, I usually don't use Network Manager on my desktop, but Network Manager seems to work a little bit better on my laptop. So I'm going to go ahead and enable Network Manager. You may prefer DHCP CD or any of those. Again, go through the handbook if you're wanting to figure out which networking protocol you want to use to get your network up and running. Network Manager is a good option. It's a safe option and works for most systems anyway, so it's a good one just to go ahead and go with. It's going to actually pull in quite a few binary packages this time, so hopefully the install won't take an enormous amount of time like the update did. The update took some time. Even though this is 25 packages, hopefully with a lot of them being binary packages, it won't take quite as long. So we'll just see how this goes. Okay, now that we have Network Manager installed, we need to make sure it is enabled at boot. That's where you do the RC update add, and this is using OpenRC, by the way. Network Manager to default, and that way Network Manager will be started when we boot the system. I'll need to edit the host file, and I'm just going to add it. Use the same host name for these and the aliases for the host name to set up my host file. Let's see what else we got to do here. We need to make sure we have a password. This will be for the actual root account. So that'll be for my actual root account. I want to enable a system logger, so we'll do syslogd just to have the system logger in place. It's not necessarily needed, but it helps. Once more, read the manual if you read the fun manual if you need to understand this a little bit more. I can't really go through every single little detail, but or this video will be extremely long. And what I'm doing here is adding that to... Oh. I'm adding that to the boot as well. So that will give me the system logger. Let's add a cron daemon. I'll just do cronny for the cron daemon. That way I can enable cron jobs. I do that specifically for my laptop for FS trim. I probably won't go through that in this video, but you can add cron jobs pretty easy with cronny. So you're going to want some sort of cron daemon. There's several different ones. Again, go through the manual. You don't have to use cronny. There's other ones you can use. And I want to add this as well to the default run level. And that way that will be started at boot. I usually go ahead and add file indexing just so you can just for search purposes and things like that on the system. So do file indexing and to go ahead and enable that. Since I am installing everything over SSH and I'll be doing that after I reboot, I want to make sure that SSH daemon is installed at boot, or is running at boot time as well. So we will do rc update add sshd to the default. To add that to the default, I'll go ahead and do bash completion as well. Sorry about that. We'll go ahead and do bash completion as well, just to give bash a little bit more features. You don't have to enable. There's no service for that, so we don't have to enable any services for that. Okay, that's done. So the next thing I want to do is time sync. This is to make sure that your time on your system is synced with the server. I use Chrony, so I'm going to be doing that. Not to be confused with the other Chrony, which is the cron daemon. I guess that's how you'd pronounce it. Chrony and Chrony. Trony, maybe? Maybe that's Trony. Yeah, I guess it would be Trony. I'm not sure. Yeah, Chrony and Trony. There we go. Whatever. That's the two I use. One's for cron daemon, the other one's for the time sync. And we will do rc update add Trony D to the default run level. And that will give us time sync. E2FS progs is probably already installed. This is if you're needing to use file system tools. I know DOSFS tools isn't. I'll go ahead and do DOSFS tools. That'll allow me to manipulate like the FAT32. That's good for the EFI or anything like that. That's probably isn't installed. Oh, whoops, I misspelled that, didn't I? Let's just do the sysfs DOSFS tools. That should give me that. Yeah, that wasn't installed. Let's see if I believe it automatically has E2FS progs installed. That's to manipulate ext4 and stuff like that, but it's probably already installed. Yeah, I don't need to reinstall it. If you're using Btrfs or ZFS or any of those, you'll need to install those file system tools. The NVMe scheduler This is just to help if you're using NVMe drives, which my laptop does have. So I want to get those UDEV rules for my NVMe drive. I believe it's an NVMe drive. Well, I got two drives and everything. One's an NVMe and one's a SSD. No, I take that back. It's not an NVMe. That's right. That's just my desktop. Anyway, it doesn't hurt to have it. Grub, I already have Grub installed, so I don't have to install Grub, the package, but I do have to install Grub. I misspelled that, didn't I? I do have to install Grub to my EFI partition, so we're going to do Grub install. My EFI directory is boot EFI. I'm going to just call my bootloader Gentoo, and I'm going to do, what is that, remove, I think that's, yeah, removable. I have to do that on my laptop or it won't, my laptop has a goofy EFI, a UEFI system, so if I don't add the removable flag, it won't boot correctly. You may not have to do that on your system, but it is something that I have to do on my laptop. That's a little ganky. And then we just make grub. This will make sure that our grub will make sure that the grub sees my kernels and will boot my kernels and everything that I have installed. And it'll have the proper configuration for grub. He's stomping around. I'm sorry about all the noise in the background. That's just the way it is. I don't know if anybody out there. I might leave that in the video. I don't know. That's my son Samuel. Wow. When he gets on, he gets on. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if any of you guys have any autistic children. He's a nonverbal autistic son of mine. His name is Sam, and he can get very, very loud. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave that in the video. If you don't like it, fast forward through it. Wow. When he gets on, he gets really, really going. I'm gonna let him go for a second. I may have to cut some of that out. He's getting loud. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to install sudo because I'm going to need. Wow. Okay. He's gonna let me talk. You just go on. You go on. You make your noise. Go ahead. Alright, we're going to install sudo. That way I can, when I Chroot, when I SSH back into my laptop, I will need to do it through my main user instead of root. You can enable SSH with root, but that's not really recommended. But I'll need to have sudo commands for my main account. So I'm going to go ahead and install sudo, in other words. Those purple ones like that, that's the binary packages. That's why those are installing a lot faster. And that's why I use binary for my laptop, especially. It's cool that Gentoo has come out with binary because that really does speed up the process considerably on slower machines. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and add a user, which is me, Colby. I'm going to add me to the wheel, to the audio, to the video, to the input. Let's see, wheel, audio, video, input. These are the groups that I'm adding it to. I can add more later if I need to, like for printer or any other things, network, stuff like that. The S is for shell. I'm going to do bash for now. I'll probably switch that to ZSH or fish later. I usually use fish, but for now we're just going to put it on bash. You can ignore the mailbox thing. That's nothing. What am I doing now? Okay, so I need to add a password for that account. Ignore that it's a weak password. I probably will be wiping this system again anyway, so I don't care about the weak password. Okay, so we have my user account on. We have grub installed. We have sudo. I have SSH. Unless I have missed a step, which is very possible, it should, in theory, be done. I'm going to exit. Now I'm exited the Chroot environment. And now I am going to unmount the partitions that I mounted. So I'm out of the Chroot. I'm still in the SSH, but I'm out of the Chroot. So now I'm going to reboot, and this will. It won't show it on here, but it's rebooting on my laptop upstairs. Yep, connection closed. That means my laptop just shut off and it's rebooting. So I'm going to give my laptop a minute to reboot, and then I'm going to see if it'll let me SSH into it. If it does, then we know that the system has worked. It rebooted. Actually, no, I need to actually go up there and remove the thumb drive. So I'm going to stop the video now, remove the thumb drive, reboot the system, and make sure it actually boots. And then we'll SSH back into it, and I'll show you. Okay, I did go upstairs and reboot my laptop manually, and yes, it did boot. So the install was a success, and Gentoo is installed on the laptop. A couple things I forgot to mention though, and I'll show you here in a second. So let's see if we can SSH into my laptop. So since it is, the username is Colby and the name is laptop, and I will SSH. Alright, there we go. So now I'm actually in my laptop, SSH'd into my new Gentoo install. The one thing I forgot to mention was for Network Manager, you need to go into nano into etc conf.d and network. Oh, wait, what is it? Host name, right? Yeah. And add your host name here, because for some reason the host name won't pick up sometimes with Network Manager, so I have to add the host name here as well as copying the host name to the other way that I did it. So that's just a heads up on that. And also make sure, since I added this user to the wheel account, to enable sudo, you need to run, it won't let me do it here, I don't think. Yeah. Or will it? Yeah, it will. You'll have to go into, well, let me show you what I did. On the root account, do your visudo and make sure that you uncomment. You go down here, scroll all the way to the bottom, and uncomment the wheel account so that you can have sudo on your user account, the main user account that's in the wheel group, so that you can use sudo commands. So I can do a sudo emerge sync, and it will go ahead and sync portage and get the files. But that's basically it. Like I said, if you're new to Gentoo, read through the manual, do it the right way. This was kind of a quick and dirty way of installing Gentoo. I didn't do any major configurations or nothing. This is just installed to a terminal. You'll want to enable, if you know, I'll install a window manager and stuff like that on this later, and I may do a video on how to do that, which we may do that. That might be the next video on Gentoo. I'll show you how installing Sway or something like that and get that up and running on the laptop. I might install it over SSH and then switch to the laptop and record the video from there. Not sure yet. But regardless, that's Gentoo on this system, and my laptop is installed with Gentoo. We did it over SSH. We did it kind of using a cheat sheet, get it done quick. Well, relatively quick. So Gentoo is booted, running, and good to go on my laptop. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope it's helpful in some sort of way. And if you like the video and this is something you enjoy, I hope you subscribe to my channel. I'm still kind of new to doing these videos. There's lots of noise in the background. I get that. I'm not the best at speaking. I get that. I'll try to do some more editing on the videos to cut out some of the more annoying parts. some of the comments I've gotten on some of my other videos have been very helpful as far as the, I can take criticism pretty well. As far as constructive criticism, I'm cool with that on these videos. Not going to offend me. If I'm doing something wrong, saying something wrong, call me out on it. You're not going to bug me. You can call me an idiot. You can call me annoying. I don't really mind. I know I'm doing a lot of ums and thumbs and ers and stuff like that. Lip smacking, stuff like that. I'll try to edit some of that out as best I can, but I'm not a great video editor and I don't have tons of time to do it. But anyway, that is Gentoo installed. Like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed the video. God bless everybody, and I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your day.